home out of your house. Last Wednesday night, we discussed that a strong family, like a building, a house, has to have a strong foundation. We talked about really two things. One is that in order to have a strong home, you have to have a correct belief and a correct practice in the truth of the Word of God. I cannot overemphasize how important the Bible is to my daily life, to your daily life, and then to the life of those who are in our families. The second thing is that we have to have the foundation of an unconditional love of parents to children. Now, don't raise your hand or anything, but I wonder how many of you have practiced that unconditional love and the affirmation of that love to your children this last week. That maybe for the first time in a long time, or maybe the first time forever, they heard come from Daddy's lips, "I love you. I'm here to love you. I'm going to love you. I don't care what. I am going to love you." Let me just throw this out again. We have such a misconception of what real love is in our world today. I'm afraid, as I talk with parents a lot, that some parents have the idea, and maybe grandparents, that the way that you demonstrate love is by giving things to your children. That if I can just give them enough, if I can provide what they would like to have, then they're going to know I love them. That is not true. Why? Because that is not love. They can't think that's love because it isn't love. Love really has very little to do with our emotions. It has everything to do with our decisions. And you've heard me say this many, many times, but love is a decision. That's why when husband and wife come and sit down in my study with me, or we meet in a restaurant somewhere, and they all, they'll say, "Preacher, we just don't love each other." And, the first thing I say is, "Well, do you really know Christ is your Savior?" "Yes." I said, "Then that's not an option God gives you. You don't have that option. You love because you decide to love." And I've said this to couples that were having problems, and I've said it a lot to young couples that I counsel with before they're married. My whole life dating Virginia and my married life with her, I had it as a practice in my own mind that I would rather her respect me as to love me. If she doesn't respect me, I can never earn her love. But if she respects me, I can earn that love. And love for her had to be a decision toward me, and my love for her had to be a decision. And when you decide to do that and you work at loving, you know what? The emotion takes care of itself. It just takes care of itself. But our children in particular have to understand that the love that you have for them is unconditional and it is affirmed to them. You tell them that. Now tonight, I want to, in our lesson tonight, I want to talk about the walls. We've got the foundation in. Now I want to talk about the walls we're going to put up. First of all, and notice again in verse 4, and ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Children must be nurtured. You remember, some of y'all probably remember, this is not all you adults, Bobby. There used to be an ad on television, and it said, how do you spell relief? R-O-L-A-I-D-S, Rolaids. Well, let me share something with you. Could I tell you how children, how they spell love when it comes to mom and dad? T-I-M-E. Time. I was reading a survey just this last week, and in this survey they said the average parent in the United States, listen to this, spends less than 36 minutes per day with their children, including time spent before the television. Out of 24 hours in a day, they spent just over a half an hour with their children. Years and years ago, I read a biography of, good night, my mind went blank. Just a minute. Well, good night. Joey, he started the Methodist Church. Wesley. His mother had, now listen to this, had 19 children. 19 children. She disciplined herself to where she would spend not less than 30 minutes a day with each child alone. Now you think about that. That's back in the days when you had to heat the iron to iron. You didn't have a washing machine or a dryer. You didn't have a microwave oven. You didn't have a television to set your other kids in front of while you were talking to the one. But she turned out some pretty good children. John and Charles Wesley are two of hers. They asked her in this book, the writer was writing it like talking to her, and people asked her, said, how have you done this with 19 children? She said, I'm very strong on love, and I'm very consistent on discipline. She said in this, now listen to this, she said, when I have to spank one of my children, I spank them till they cry softly. That's where Dr. Bill got that idea. You spank them till they stop crying. When the first time after we were taught that, Wynn was about 3, and he did something, he had to be spanked, and I told Virginia, I said, we're going to do that. She said, honey, that will not work. That just doesn't work. I said, well, it doesn't sound feasible to me either, but let's try it. And I was spanking Wynn, and he was screaming like a wild Comanche Indian. And I just leaned over and I said, now, son, when you're through crying, I am through spanking. He went, I mean, he cut it off just like that. And I remembered Dr. Rice said, if they whimper, start over. And I said, son, don't whimper. He knew what that was at 3 years old. It's amazing when parents, we offer so many excuses of why we can't spend time with our children. Every parent, I don't care who you are, you have demands that are placed upon your time. In our society now, I know that there are times, and I mean when my children were at home, there were times when I would come home sometimes having dealt with people all day long and having dealt with problems in the ministry, my mind was dead. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying? And for a mom and dad to come home from work like that, I promise you, you're going to hear, Dad, can we? Dad, do you think you could help me with this? And there is such a tendency to say, don't you know I'm tired? Now, granted, I think there are times when mom or dad can come home so beat, so tired, that they need to take a few minutes to catch their breath. You may need to take a few minutes, go get you a glass of tea and say, look, let Dad have 10, 15 minutes and boy, we'll get at this. Nothing wrong with that. But if you don't bring them up in that nurture of the Lord, you're going to find out when you say no to them and no to the time you could spend with them and should spend with them, you're going to find that your children can be provoked to anger. And that anger can come because a father or a mother who is mad themselves, they're absent, they're abusive. But you hear me. Ignoring your child's needs for love, that's spelled T-I-M-E, creates in their minds, whether they recognize it or not, resentment. They can become eventually those who are rebellious and filled with anger because mom and dad just didn't take the time. I mean, it is a tremendous problem. And I know it's easy for parents, and I think especially dads, for us to sometimes be strong on discipline, but weak on nurturing. It's sort of like a lot of churches, strong on getting people saved, but weak on making disciples. Why? Training disciples takes T-I-M-E. We want to win one. Hey, glad you're going to heaven. Then go find another one. And I'm afraid so many times it's so that preachers can stand up in meetings and say, we had 15 saved, or we baptized 21. And but what are they doing? How many of those are still coming to church? How many of those are in Sunday school? And that's why, to be honest, you have to ask yourself, at least I do, after my children have lived in my home, what are they doing with God now in their own life? How are they living for Christ? Now, granted, I think you can do much right, and children still, when they get older, make their mind up what they're going to do. But I'll tell you something, it's easier to impress upon them if you start when they are little tykes. A child is sort of like a new little sapling. Sometimes you have to drive a stake up by it and tie it to it so it'll stay straight, because they can be bent any way the wind wants to blow them. You need to be the stick, if I can put it this way, you need to be the stick in your children's lives. And dads, you need to live this out in front of them. Now, of course, you've heard me teach a lot, but I do believe, without a doubt, children need discipline and they need strong authority. But without love and nurture, discipline becomes that which produces anger and discouragement. I just can't please Daddy. You know, one of the hardest lessons that I've had to learn, and I continue to learn it with my children. My way's not the only way. Y'all hearing what I'm saying? Now, this means the message I preach about salvation, living for Jesus, that's the only way. But how to get that across, you can have a different way. If you brush off your child's request for your time and attention when they're small, you know, go and play. Mommy's pretty busy right now. Go and play. Mommy's watching her TV program right now. Go and play. You know, I'm talking on the phone to my friend right now. Dad can say, we'll do it, but it's going to be later. And after a while, if it never gets done, that later means no. And it's because we're tired. It's because we've had a bad day. But you listen to me. If you don't do it when they're young, you'll want them to do what you say when they're old. And if they have learned to live without your input, they will not listen to it when they get older. Y'all know this. I share with you personal things with my kids. It's because I know more about us than I know about y'all. If y'all tell me things, then I could tell it. But y'all wouldn't dare do that. But Wynn was going through, or is going through, no, he was. He worked it out. Really a major problem in their family. And he called me yesterday and he said, Dad, I just got to talk to you. Are you busy? I was, but I wasn't. I said, no, man. What you got? Well, I was so grateful that I wasn't on a landline where they charged me by the minute talking. Cell phone, unlimited minutes, so I talk. And matter of fact, helping people a lot of times is listening. Be the sounding board for them to talk to. And a lot of times they'll come to their own decision after being able to say it out loud to somebody that'll listen to them. And he talked and talked and talked. I guess we talked for 30 or 40 minutes. And finally he said, well, Dad, what do you think I ought to do? I said, Wynn, you've already answered your own question. And what you told me you thought you were going to do is what you ought to do. And I said, but when you do it, and by the way, it's not with Miska or one of the boys, it's another family member. I said, you're going to have repercussions from that. But that doesn't mean your decision is wrong. Just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong. If you wait to do stuff that's right till everybody agrees with you, you might well just go out and live in the woods somewhere and don't ever talk to anybody. But what I told you that to say this. Why did he call me? Because I listened to him when he was young. I talked to him when he was young. When they are teens and you really want them to listen to you and to open up to you and talk with you, they won't know how because they didn't learn it when it was easy to learn. Your children, my children are a gift from God. We've got to make time for them. And by the way, I'm not talking about watching television. I'm talking about living together, sharing together. Do something together. Get a project. If my son had ever asked me to take him fishing, I'd have called Tom Wright and said, hey, let's take my boy fishing. I don't know how to fish. Don't want to learn how to fish. Boy, they caught, how many pounds probably fish did y'all catch down there in Mexico? 300 or 400 pounds. Margie caught a goldfish or something. A mahi. Y'all ate that poor thing, didn't you? Yeah. You animal lovers, y'all are going to really get mad at her. But see, that's great to do that. I'll tell them, Margie and Tom, they have more courage than I do. They're going on their 25th wedding anniversary trip and taking all their kids with them. I would adopt my kids out that week. But anyway, your children are this gift, and do a project with them, and take on a job with them. Get out and play together. Read a book together. Play checkers. Don't play chess. That's too much thinking. Lou and Tawana have known this for years and years, even back when my children were little. But I've asked both those ladies, no matter what I'm doing, no matter who I'm talking to, or what I'm talking about, if Virginia or Wynn or Vonda call me, you interrupt me. You interrupt me. Now, I will then make the decision where I'll talk to them right then, or if I say, hey, can I call you right back? But I want them to know they're important to me. And they've told them, say, hey, he's talking with some people, but he told me to buzz in if you call. And by the way, that goes with any of my grandkids now. I want to take their calls. Now, I'll probably eventually, knowing them, say, hey, would y'all quit calling me so much? Bring them up with a wall of nurturing. Now, look at verse 4 again. We've got to hurry. He said, bring them up in the nurture, but then notice, the admonition of the Lord. As we were talking about nurturing, you might have noticed I didn't even say anything about the admonition, but I want to talk about it for just a few minutes. Nurture deals with the environment of encouragement, while admonition deals with specific instruction. Your first day on whatever new job it was, I guarantee you didn't know all about it. Somebody had to teach you. I remember the first day I showed up for work after I graduated from high school and went to work for the electric department there in the city of Garland. And I was on a line crew. And I was that guy that stood on the ground when I first got started and had the lineman to pull a rope up with him. He'd tie it off and had a hook on it, and you had a bucket. You put stuff in the bucket for it, send it up to him. And this lineman that I was breaking in under, my older brother Leroy, had trained him. And he called down to me and he said, go over there to the truck, get me a copper to aluminum parallel groove clamp and dope it on one side. I looked up and I said, what did you say? He started laughing. He said, well, I assume Leroy had taught you something. I said, no. What is that and where is it? And I don't deal in dope. He said, that's some juice I want you to squeeze in it. Go around the other side of the truck, open the bin, it's on the right-hand side. So I figured it out, puts that on, put it in there, send it up. I never had to ask him what that was again. But I'd still be on that truck looking for it if somebody hadn't taught me what it was. One of the great detriments, I think, is that so oftentimes we expect things out of our children we've never taught them what to do or not to do and how to do it. I don't know, I'm going to jump out in the dark here, but George, I think probably when you jumped into training on your tank the first time, sort of reminds you something of a spaceship or something. But somebody had to train you. And by the way, the Army's not going to turn a several $100,000 piece of equipment over to a person they haven't trained to do what that equipment needs to be done. Why do you think children are any different? They're born with a brain, but you have to put knowledge in, so they have to have something to draw from. You can only operate with reference that you have in your mind. I dreamed the other night that I flew an airplane. Now this is the truth. I woke up in a cold sweat. You know why? I had to land that thing. I mean, putting the throttle forward and holding the pedals together so you go straight down the runway and pull it back a little bit, it'll take off on its own, but man, that ground comes up in a hurry. And I remembered, in my dream I was coming in for a landing. Man, I was nervous, and in my dream I was sweating, but really, I was perspiring. And I remembered a friend of mine who is a pilot, he's in heaven now, he said, a landing is nothing but a controlled crash. That thought came into my mind. And thank God I woke up before I landed. Children have to be instructed. The greatest teacher that your children will ever have is your example. Your children, without a doubt, I believe what I'm about to tell you. They need to believe that the Christian life is real to you. Now, I don't think anything is more detrimental to a child's life, and especially a teenager's, than for mom and dad to be one thing here at church and another thing away from church. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying? Why should our life, listen to me very carefully, why should our life be so different away from this building and this property when the same God that's with us here is with us out there? Again, this last birthday that I had, last April, I was able to be with Wynn. Again, first time in probably 20 years I was able to be with one of the children on my birthday. And Wynn's family, he and Miska started something when they first got married that on the other one's birthday, the other one would tell them what they appreciate about that person whose birthday it is. And then when Wyatt was born and got up old enough to talk and think a little bit, they got Wyatt in on it. And they'd tell him what they appreciate about him. Then he'd have to tell what he appreciated about his dad on his birthday and his mom on her birthday. And now Seth does the same thing. Well, it was my birthday. And Wyatt, he said, I am so grateful for my dad, my granddad, being a generous person. I chuckled. I like to get him things, so he enjoys that. And Seth said, I like Paul because he tells me and shows me he loves me. And I forget, Miska said something I like Dad because how he and Graham's trained your dad to love their wife. And then Wynn said, I thank God that my daddy's never been different. From church, in the pulpit, to vacation, to going shopping, to going out to eat. He's always the same. Crazy. I told him, I said, you ruined it, bud. Inconsistency is one of the greatest enemies to Christian stability in my life as a true believer. One of the greatest methods of teaching our children, as I said, is by example. I think our children should see and hear and watch, even if it's subconsciously. They ought to watch their parent read and study the Scripture. By the way, I think what they see us reading and studying teaches them what's important to us. They ought to see their parents writing out the check for tithing and missions and bus offering, building offering, whatever it is. They ought to see us do that. They ought to see us put that in. And by the way, I give my offering publicly. I think it's good for you to see the preacher put money in the offering plate every time it comes by. Well, preacher, I just can't afford to put anything every time it comes by. That's probably because you don't put in every time it comes by. Give and it shall be. No, y'all don't understand. Children should be witnesses to their parents helping others. It's not normal to help others. You have to train yourself to do that. Yesterday I went to the grocery store. And Brother Travis, I was pushing my basket there, and I always use the little basket. If you use a little basket, you don't buy as much. So I had that little basket, and I was going through there, and I just had the thought, I'd like to find somebody that I could, with a clear conscience, pay for their groceries today. So I started way down on the far end, because I check out always on this end. And I'd go by to see somebody checking out. And every one of them had wine or beer in their basket. And I said, you know, I would go up there and do it and say, now, charge them for that. But I didn't want to embarrass them. But next time I go, I'm going to find somebody that I don't even know. I said that I don't know. Boy, it's wonderful when you pastor spiritual people. I'm going to stop on that. Y'all get out of here.